Today we have a very interesting lineup, and we'll be discussing India-Australia partnership in the Indo-Pacific region. And as we all know, the two prime ministers have recently spoken to each other. And to speak on this subject, we have two eminent speakers. Excellency Barry O'Farrell, who was a member of the Parliament of New South Wales from 1995 to 2015, and including as it states 43rd Premier between 2011 and 2014. And as Premier, Mr. O'Farrell initiated and led annual trade missions to India to promote economic, cultural, and social links between New South Wales and the states of India. He's also served as New South Wales Special Envoy to India and has made a significant contribution as the Deputy Chair of the Australia-India Council Board. He's presently Australia's High Commissioner to India. And our next second speaker is going to be His Excellency A. Gitesh Sarma, who's an Indian Foreign Service officer of the 1986 batch, currently serving as Indian High Commissioner to Australia. Prior to this, Ambassador Sharma has served as Indian missions in Russia, Ukraine, Hong Kong, Pakistan, and United Kingdoms, including as Ambassador of India to Uzbekistan and High Commissioner of India in Fiji. Mr. Sarma was also Secretary West in the Ministry of External Affairs till November 2019. And to moderate this session, we have another eminent diplomat, Shri Amar Sinha, who is presently a member of India's National Security Advisory Board. He retired from the Indian Foreign Service as Secretary Economic Relations in the Ministry of External Affairs with a diplomatic career spanning 35 years. He served as India's ambassador to Afghanistan and Tajikistan. He has also served as Joint Secretary Trade Policy in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. He presently serves as a director on the board of Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited and is a distinguished fellow at RIS New Delhi. Now, without wasting much time, I'll request Ambassador Amar Sinha to kindly take on from here and conduct the proceedings. Over to Ambassador Amar Sinha.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Namaskar. It's very interesting, and that today we are holding the 66th dialogue of India Foundation, and today it also happens to be 6th of June. I was wondering, people who look at numerology may think that this augurs well for India-Australia relations. In fact, it is a very timely initiative by India Foundation, 2 days after the virtual summit of our two prime ministers, to get this panel together so that they could perhaps give us further insights into some real serious decisions that have been taken and the road that has been sort of laid out by the two prime ministers. Of course, as Mr. Ram Madhav mentioned, that we have been waiting for this actual real summit for some time, but good that it happened virtually, because it is going to inject a new dynamism in our relationship. Of course, the High Commissioners will tell us about the important declarations, the number of documents that were issued, and actually some seminal documents from our perspective have issued, and it basically underlines that we are very aware of not only the shared geography, but the shared responsibility that we have towards the geography and the new emerging geopolitics in the region. So without preempting the High Commissioners, let me invite High Commissioner Farrell to take the floor first. And I think both of you High Commissioners have 10 to 15 minutes for your initial comments, and then we will of course have question and answer after your comments. So over to you, High Commissioner Farrell.
Thank you, Ambassador Sinha. Can I firstly thank Ram Madhav and the India Foundation for this opportunity. Can I say I'm particularly delighted that His Excellency Gitesh Sarma is with us. The two of us have worked closely over the time that I've been in this role, and I'm very grateful for that, and I'm certain that the relationship wouldn't be as strong as it is without his efforts. Not to upset you, Ambassador Sinha, I would just like to make 3 opening points, if I may, and it may not go for 15 minutes, but better to have discussion and questions than lectures. My first point is that whilst COVID has clearly further highlighted the importance of regional and global cooperation, I don't think we should underestimate the work that's happened between the two countries, the cooperation, the discussions in recent years. And principally those those activities have centred around three of our shared interests: a desire to contribute to a more secure, open, inclusive and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. Secondly, around building our strong economies, including resilient economies in both countries. And thirdly, as has been highlighted during this crisis, the importance of strengthening international institutions so they're better able to assist the citizens, not just of our countries, but of countries around the world. And I think what's come as a result of those interactions is that it's more important than ever for like-minded democracies like Australia and India to cooperate in shaping the region in which we live and, of course, the global community in which we want to continue to contribute. And this is what I think this historic elevation of the relationship as a comprehensive strategic partnership is what is all about. The second point I wanted to make is that whilst defence and strategic issues are clearly the cornerstone of the agreements and the partnership that have been settled on Thursday, that's in one sense no surprise, because it's been perhaps an underappreciated element of the Australia-India cooperation for many years. I won't wax eloquently about the various elements, but I've always described it as perhaps the deepest and the broadest relationship that we've worked together on in many recent years. But despite that, I don't think we should overlook the other elements of the agreements that have been signed on Thursday, which relate to science and innovation cooperation, that relate to ways in which through trade and investment we can also partner to deliver that hope to our citizens of greater opportunities through increased economic activity. And my third and final point as an opener, if you like, is that we should also not underestimate the value of the personal relationships in delivering what, from the Australian perspective, is a tremendous step up as a result of Thursday. And we've seen, particularly during this COVID crisis, but including before it, increased contacts between, for instance, our foreign secretaries, our foreign ministers, but I particularly want to highlight the relationship between our two prime ministers and just remind you that my prime minister has only been in office since August of 2018. He's had 4 opportunities on the sidelines of various forums to meet with Prime Minister Modi, but it's fair to say they were not extended or long interactions. And Thursday was a genuine virtual leaders summit in the fact that they had quality time together where they ranged across a broad range of issues. And as one of those who was able to observe the whole interaction, what struck me was simply the relationship and the rapport that exists between both of our leaders. The fact that they share common values, the fact that they share a view of what government is about, which is focusing on the interests and the aspirations and the needs of their citizens. And I believe that that's been a crucial part in delivering this partnership and these agreements to us. And I think it holds us in good stead for the future when we seek to further attach high ambitions to this relationship, and as we seek to implement the various agreements, and as we seek to explore other ways in which two like-minded democracies on either side of this magnificent ocean, within this region that is going to be increasingly economically important to the world, grows and develops in the coming years. So again, thank you for this opportunity. I look Australia is very pleased that we have taken these steps with India. We believe we have many interests, a country whose diaspora adds to the vibrancy of our democracy, as well as the economic strength of our nation. And we look forward to working our way with India through into the post-COVID world, into restoring our economies, in looking to ensure that we not only have strong, reliable supply chains, but that our businesses are also able to learn their lessons from what we've seen in recent times.
Thank you, High Commissioner. We'll come back with questions later. Let me give the floor to my dear friend and our High Commissioner, Gitesh.
Thank you very much, and Ambassador Amar Sinha, it's a pleasure to see you. And there's really a galaxy of friends indeed today. So to say just friend is probably doesn't do justice. Almost every and each one of you and the panel, I really respect. I've learned, and many of you have had a vital role in the shaping of even relations between India and Australia. Ramaji, thank you so much. It couldn't be more timely than this. Just 2 days, virtually 2 days after the summit, to be meeting in this way and the virtual way and defining everything and being together. Let me set the context in which the India-Australia virtual summit took place, and some of the issues and some of those elements of the trajectory, the positive trajectory will probably come out. And I have, of course, the greatest pleasure in recognizing High Commissioner Farrell, and it's for the sake of everyone that we are addressing each other as excellencies, but between ourselves we are on first name terms, so that should be very reassuring. So nice to see you, Barry, today, and thank you for your own presentation. So let me just talk a little about the context in which the India-Australia Virtual Summit was, set, and it's important to know the environment in which the leaders met. So much that we had much that we read and think about the India-Australia relations. It's been evolving over a period of time, and it's been picking up speed. And if you look at most of us as diplomats, we tend to look for turning points, and for us, it's always that we want to report that this was an exciting period and this was a turning point. Indeed, this is a turning point. But if you look back, you'll find that the end of the Cold War, really, we must recognize that the breakup of the USSR, the way international politics evolved, there were many opportunities to engage on specific issues, and so it became a kind of exchanges on several issues. You have the climate exchange, issue, you have terrorism, you have the Indo-Pacific. So you can break down international activity in terms of issues. And then when you engage with each other, you find that there is much in common between us. And the democratic credentials of India and Australia, it makes our foreign policy also very broad-based and much in sync with our own national ethos. So in that sense, it's stable. It's something which helps us respect the other side. It provides for different kinds of views. So with Australia, these fundamentals were very important. The changes that took place after Cold War was important. I won't go into the history of all that, but I think it's important again to recognize that when Australia took the big decision to export uranium to India sometime around 2009, I was also fortunate at that time to be in the Department of Atomic Energy. I think we must recognize that it was a big psychological barrier had been overcome. I mean, the kind of relationship that was possible once you have broken the barrier of cooperation in the nuclear domain, that opens up doors and you can then move on to almost anything. In this period, when we look at Prime Minister Morrison's and this virtual summit with Prime Minister Modi, I think that virtual word or term probably there's a lot of excitement, and I do get messages from friends and colleagues in India. I think we shouldn't overdo the virtual aspect. There's a lot of substance, and as was pointed out earlier, that this would have taken place earlier. And the Raisina dialogue, the US Premier strategic dialogue, actually Prime Minister Morrison was to have inaugurated it. His inaugural address was eagerly anticipated, and Australia was given that singular honor, but it could not take place because of the bushfires. We respected those considerations, but we look forward to another occasion later in May. Again, something else came in the way, the pandemic situation, which not only affects India and Australia, but practically the whole world. But I think one way to beat the pandemic is to continue to do our work, and our work, our joint activity will actually contribute to beating the pandemic in some way at least. So the virtual summit, therefore, must be seen against the backdrop of the activity which is already underway. Um, I think what is important also is to see that when I mentioned that on several issues we had started engaging with each other, and there were very positive vibes. In the more recent period, let's be very candid, and the kind of approach Australia has taken to issues of concern to India, that was really noted and appreciated. When the Pulwama attack took place last year, Australia was one of the first countries to issue a very strong statement saying Pakistan could no longer allow extremist groups the legal and physical space to operate from its territory. And it asked for meaningful action against Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba. So that is definitely something worth noting. Australia also co-sponsored UNSC resolution to declare Masood as a global terrorist. So you find that on something like terrorism, there is that common kind of approach that we can't go into that kind of theoretical kind of debates. The fact was that India was a victim of terror. We had a real problem. We were next to the epicenter of terror, and Australian understanding this regard, I think, contributed a great deal to the setting in which our ties have evolved. I think the JNK issue also, let's say, we are amongst intellectuals, we are very candid with each other, and I think the Australian decision to, or Australian approach to respect India's decision with regard to Article 370 was again something worth appreciating. I mean, they realized that this is something that was internal to India, and they were hopeful that everything would work out well, and they never made any real public statements in any other way. They engaged us in other ways, in the diplomatic, through using diplomatic channels. So that was something again which shows the maturity with which we were beginning to deal with each other. There is the bipartisan element also, which comes out extremely well. That we go back to the uranium deal. It happened during the Labour government, and then that kind of approach to India has been carried forward. Even on the eve of the virtual summit, the very eve, I was really delighted to see the Labour's shadow foreign minister Penny Wong actually in a way in advance criticizing the Prime Minister Scott Morrison that perhaps you may not give that much importance to relations with India, but we want you to realize that India is very important country for Australia. So it cuts across parties. It's bipartisan in this country. So that was really something which was an important setting. There were some other changes also we cannot ignore, which have changed the dynamics of our relationship. And the virtual summit is only one aspect of that. The diaspora, for instance, within Australia, Barry also mentioned that they're extremely well thought of, and almost 7 lakhs, highly skilled Indian diaspora, and they gel extremely well with the Australian society, very comfortable with each other. So that's something that we notice constantly on the ground. Almost 100,000 Indian students there, increasing numbers. They would like to avail of the best education facilities in Australian universities. So that's and the other is the diaspora. We can also talk in general terms, which allows Australians to see India slightly differently. What has changed in India? That globally also Indian diaspora has performed extremely well in the world's most competitive societies. So when you speak with friends in Australia, it comes out always that you see in the United States and some of the top CEOs, we won't name them, but each one of them is a star himself. There were other things which were really building up to the summit. The investments, if you look, it's not. It's a kind of equal situation. It's almost US dollars 10 billion on either side. So it's a completely balanced kind of relationship. Of course, we would never be satisfied. But in the run-up to a virtual summit, to find that both India and Australia are almost 10 billion each in the other countries. So investment is usually a good sign and that that you are risking your capital. So it's something that always shows well. Trade also is. We constantly hear in the media and elsewhere about RCEP and India's decision. So let's be candid here as well. That actually the trade is in favor of Australia. So it is not about India being difficult. 15 billion Australian US dollars exports of Australia to 5 billion by India. So even we are talking of taking to new levels. But even as we speak, it's very okay for Australia to find that India is absorbing those exports. So, but coming to RCEP itself, yes, it was when I came a few months back to Australia. It was a constant refrain. But when by the government level, we always found that there is a great deal of respect, that we understand our reasons. We would have liked you to be part of RCEP, but we respect your reasons, and when you are comfortable, we'll move in certain ways. So I think that was an important signal also from Australia. There were, of course, some other signals. The Australians had brought out this Peter Varghese report. That is, they had a very comprehensive strategy, former High Commissioner to India, where he led the report, and the thought was to, develop a very scientific or well structured policy towards India of raising the economic engagement, and there is to be a mirror strategy paper to come from our side. One can get into this, the details of such reports, but the important thing was signaling. The signaling was right, that Australia looks as India as a potentially, a very, very good economic partner. So that messaging was coming out constantly. And on our side as well, when we promised that we would also prepare an Australia strategy paper, we are fine-tuning it because of the pandemic. Certain things have changed, otherwise it would have been in the public domain. So that was a signal from our side as well. The other aspects I have said, but defense is, when we say comprehensive, when we say strategic, it usually means long-term. Usually there is no limit to the cooperation. So practically every area of cooperation that will be covered in the as part of the joint India-Australia activity, defense, cyber. Interestingly, in this summit also, we talked about working together with our respective strategies for the South Pacific, our own PAPIC, and the Pacific policy of Pacific Step Up policy of Australia. So there are a lot of synergies. We both see positive aspects of the presence of the other in our respective regions close to us. So we're happy with that. The COVID itself, COVID-19 pandemic itself, even there when medical supplies were scarce or disrupted, even there these small gestures were very important. And when a friend like Australia asked for certain kinds of supplies, hydroxychloroquine, paracetamol, some other items also, within the limitations that were there, we found it possible to share with Australia. So I think these gestures also at the leadership level, which they created that kind of nice feeling when we were going into this summit, that we were comfortable with each other. Our leaders have been meeting directly, meeting in the sidelines, margins of multilateral meetings, and talking to each other as well. They're extremely comfortable with each other. I think there is a lot to say about the personal rapport and the chemistry, as we keep saying. I don't want to underestimate the other aspects like cultural linkages. Even at a time when probably we were not such a big, big item in the basket, somehow culturally we were always important in Australia, and we grew. And similarly, in India also, in some ways we did relate to Australia. I sit in Canberra, and we have the architect who designed Canberra is buried in Lucknow, and he also designed parts of Lucknow University. So every day, some little fact comes out, which it looks very interesting that it has not got the attention. I studied in a school run by Australian missionaries. I never realized the Australian connection, but I think cricket is definitely something which is much to it brings a lot of joy. I found when I was here right from the beginning, since November, the entire Australian cricketing fraternity was praying for our women's cricket team that it would reach the finals on 8th of March on Women's Day. There could be no better cricket match than in India Australia. But what is interesting is that this whole business of India Australia in cricket it has got mixed up. Even our heroes probably have got mixed up. And even in the summit, Prime Minister Morrison mentioned about the lessons Mr. Virat Kohli had given to the Australians last time he was here. And if you look at it, it's so mixed up with IPL, and David Warner and others have become household names in India. So it's really that's something that brings us. And one more thing about cricket that Australians also learn to respect us because we play like them. So that kind of new ways of projecting ourselves, or the aggression we bring on the sporting fields in Australian ways actually bring a lot of respect for India. So within this framework, you'll find that the virtual summit sort of unfolds, and something which was always going to happen at summit. We defied the pandemic, defied all the difficult situations building up around us, in our own countries, in the region. And it was important to meet, important to engage, and to get all these agreements in place and continue the dialogue. Of course, those who know that these are all channels, virtual channels, they're not a substitute for the usual kind of diplomatic engagement, but they supplement. So the discussions definitely, when we meet in other ways, it would be more extensive and probably cover more subjects as well. But it was a very, very good sign. The last point really I wanted to make is like any comprehensive partnership, like any relationship which is two-way. You can talk, you can pull out individual examples to suit your story, but the way that I have seen it unfold is there are different levels. The sense one gets, if I'm again very, very candid, the political level, it's really fantastic. The kind of progress we made and the relationships built at all from top to bottom. It's really amazing that you can really pick up a phone, and the first instinct is always to be with the other side, to understand that there is a lot of positive a lot of positive results we can bring to the table by working together. The sense I get about economic, that we have our own individual kind of situations, very specific to us. Australia is very much into export of resources. India has built its economy differently, and our own large population. We have a lot of manufacturing, so it's somewhat different. I think although we have said about business investment is roughly same, but there's more scope for business men to engage with each other. I think knowledge will bring with it results. So there is a need for the business community to pull up and match those expectations which come from the political engagement. The third one I will say, and that's something, it's an impression which I have gathered here, and it may be of interest, that I find increasingly when I scan newspapers and other kinds of literature, when I see there's not a day in Australian newspapers where there's something about India is not there. So it is very nice. It's a nice feeling, and often it is positive. There are a lot of think tanks also. They are beginning to write and talk about India. There are also some books which have come. Not everything, I would say. Again, be very candid here. Not everything is taking into account the reality of India today's reality. But as I said, that in a comprehensive relationship, things will move at different speeds. And the very fact that scholars here have started reading about India and writing about India means that eventually it will come, it will get that much more sophisticated. But that's something to really savor now, that everywhere there is a conversation revolving around the Indo-Australia partnership. Think tanks and media and other scholars are very much part of this process. So that is something which I mentioned to you, knowing that each one of you is an intellectual and thinker, today, and is known as an intellectual and thinker about international affairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, High Commissioner Gitesh Sarma. Thank you for a very comprehensive overview. In fact, we, of course, we are fairly convinced that though the meeting was virtual, the comprehensive strategic partnership document, but also the emphasis that obviously the two have given, that they have issued a separate joint declaration and shared vision on maritime cooperation. So I will ask them the easier questions. I'll leave the panel. First, of course, there's uncertainty. You talked about cricket. We don't know. We are waiting for the next series. But tell me, on the two questions which flows from the documents that I saw, one was very interesting thing, that you have signed an MOU on public administration and governance issues. What exactly is the background, and what is it that how do we wish to operationalize this? And second, beyond defense cooperation, there's also cooperation in defense S&T. Now, does that indicate that we are looking at joint development or joint manufacturing? Third, of course, RCEP. You talked about RCEP, but was there any talk of reviving the old bilateral track of India-Australia free trade agreement, which had started, but then it stopped? And of course, India Foundation always draws a lot of young people. So if two of you could also talk about the partnership in education, higher education particularly, which I know that Australia is becoming a destination of choice for many, many children. So how do you look at deepening this relationship?
I'm happy to kick off, Gitesh. The public administration governance agreement, I think, reflects that the views of both our Prime Ministers, who are very outcomes focused, on the need to ensure that our public service not only provides quality advice, but is also able to take away the agreements that we signed on Thursday and effectively implement them to achieve the visions that our leaders wanted to. I think another part of that agreement potentially gives India the opportunity to tap into the experiences that Australia has had in delivering significant reforms through our public sector to our economy. So, there are many shared challenges both our Prime Ministers have. Yes, India has challenges of greater size and dimension than Australia does, but at the present time, we're both working in similar areas. And we've seen up until this last month, 31 years of continuous economic growth, driven largely by a number of tranches of serious economic reforms that could not have materialised and been delivered without a strong bureaucracy listening to the outline of the government's intentions and getting on and helping to deliver that. So I think it is interesting, as you say, Ambassador Sinha. It's not the usual agreement that two governments have, but I think we have Prime Ministers who know that it's not only international institutions that need reform from time to time. We need to make sure that
Mm.
that our bureaucracies are fit for purpose and doing the tasks that not only government wants but the public need. In relation to the free trade agreement, well, yes, there is a statement in the comprehensive strategic partnership about re-engaging towards a comprehensive economic a relationship between India and Australia, and that's a good thing because that will assist both of us to grow our economies. Is it going to be easy? No, but most good things in life aren't easily obtained. What we're hoping to do is to pick up in those discussions some of the progress that's been made in recent bilateral trade talks, and we are optimistic about those matters. You know, I'm delighted that this month pomegranates from India are able to be sold into Australia. Now that's a small issue, but it's a further sign of the deepening of the relationship and the desire for us to assist each other with that sort of reciprocity. That we believe that there are elements that we can provide to assist India and vice versa. I think I heard the RCEP word mentioned. We acknowledge that that's a matter for India to decide. I don't think anybody has any illusions about India's decision or the reasons behind it, but that doesn't stop us pursuing a bilateral arrangement with India that, as I say, will be mutually beneficial. You know, for us, the key areas that we've identified where there are opportunities are things like energy and education, which I'll come back to in response to that element of your question, but also biotechnology, advanced manufacturing, water and agricultural businesses. And we have a company in the south of India at the present time which is assisting to provide services in overhauling water supply in one of the larger states. That has the benefit of improving that supply for the citizens and the industry in those states, but also has the extra benefit of providing the wherewithal for Indians to do that for themselves in years to come. So there's lots of synergies there. In relation to overseas students, we are delighted to be a quality provider of higher education in particular. We're delighted that we've seen the number of students from India increase. We share Indian students in Australia's frustration, in India's frustration that because of COVID at the present time, there's been a disruption to that. But in May, the Prime Minister of Australia announced a forward program for the easing of restrictions across Australia. Phase 3 of that deals with higher education and the need to provide a safe corridor for students coming from India to Australia that respects the health challenges that regrettably are still likely to be with us for some time, but also capitalises on the quality of the education, the price point of the education, if I can be as bold, but also the safe environment which Australia offers to students, not just from India, but from around the world who want to come and study there. So I think all of those things are important, but as many of the people on this webinar will know better than I do, it goes back to the point that Ambassador Sinha raised first, which is all of these things rely upon a responsive, effective public sector that is able to deliver the outcomes, or at least the corridors or the processes that will deliver the outcomes that both our Prime Ministers are keen to have.
Well, if I may supplement what Barry has said, I think the public administration document that really has its basis that we have essentially similar Anglo-Saxon systems which provide for easier absorption of ideas where efficiencies can be brought into effect. So in that sense, I think that was really the backdrop that with a certain similar history that and probably institutions which have similar historical basis, it would be easier for us and something mutually beneficial to understand each other systems and where our own local needs have led to us bringing certain innovations. so which we can share with the other side. So that was really the background. So it's an interesting kind of cooperation. So it really shows that we're going down to the level of governance. But it's really also the fact that we are democratic societies, and within which these systems are, the public servants are operating there, the bureaucracies are operating in this democratic framework. So we are comfortable in discussing and examining things which can improve our governance, models. As far as RCEP and SICA is concerned, yes, I think the free trade debate itself might have been sort of ignited with the global changes. Probably the free trade, which the many of the countries have also taken a new look at free trade agreements. So I won't name them. So I think that they probably they're not as emotional about free trade agreements as we believe that they are. So they constantly look to renegotiate. Britain has gone out of Brexit also, has done Brexit as well. So I think so. The important thing is that within Australia there is that understanding that India will take its time, and so I think that respect has always come out in all the bilateral discussions, that it's for you to take a call. But yes, that SICA element was there, Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement, and the bilateral track, yes, that can be built into some kind of arrangement which meets the requirements under the circumstances. So that is something which, to be fair to Australia, that they did not push something which is not feasible for India, and it has been clarified even publicly. As far as higher education is concerned, yes, I think in general the Indians have been coming in droves, and almost 100,000 Indian students were there. I say were because I don't know what is scenario now. There was a situation where it looked that the education system here would be disrupted for a long, long time. But because Australia has performed well, in controlling the pandemic, I think education sector was one of the first that has received attention, because it's an asset which has to be preserved. I think if I can talk from my experience here, that there was immediately after Prime Minister Morrison had said publicly somewhere that our focus is, the domestic challenges. Later on, it was interpreted in India that Indian students were not welcome. But I would say that I wouldn't say behind the scenes they were definitely on conversation with us how best they can improve the conditions for the Indian students. The signal was given to universities, I believe. Almost each one of them came to us roughly at the same time, almost in tandem, and said that they were getting their own individual packages ready for Indian students. So they are looking to get more Indian students, and they value greatly Indian students. So, so one of the first things in this phase where we're coming out of the pandemic, the universities are a priority, I believe, and the international student component is again getting a lot of attention. So we are at that phase now where I think Indian students will feel more comfortable that this is the education that they had wanted, not just online or something from other kinds of education which is more remote learning. So education is something seen as here to stay. But if from the discussions, if I were to say, I do remember one line which said that look forward to India, Australians also going to India to study. So that line was definitely mentioned, and so everything in a relationship, when it's two-way, it's more enduring, and I think many would benefit from Australian programs of sending their own students to India, and that was reiterated during the interactions. Defense sector, yes, as trust grows, as as there is faith in each other, and as we understand each other, our own peculiar requirements or specific conditions in which we operate. Australia had a big defense team in India, Defense Expo this time, and so they are, there is a feeling that we need to work together on the S&T side, and it is important not just to have some sporadic, some exercise here there, but to make it a little more kind of an arrangement where which reflects the new levels of trust. So that's something that is a very positive aspect coming out. I can share, I think the idea is to be candid and give a little more than what's in the public domain. Sometimes it takes time for certain kinds of things to be available to India, even within Australia, because of historical reasons. But it's not because of one thing. I guess it's just the next step. You just have to point it out, and it starts moving in that direction. I can give you one example, like information technology, and where Indians are, known for their high quality services. But many of the Indian companies found that because of this old security dimensions, the typically many contracts were going to the American companies, which in turn were subcontracting it to Indian companies. So it was a kind of a lower circle. It was a very complicated arrangement. But it's not kind of blame game. The way it goes now is that when we bring it to the attention, then there's a the Australian side is our perception is they're very open, and they try to look into it to see how best to meet our expectations. So it's a matter of time that as I said, things move at different speeds. Not everything is the same go. It's a comprehensive partnership, so you can always pull out something and say this is not where it should be. But we're pretty confident that with the kind of equation there is, that even on the defense side or IT side or on the security side, you will get this, we'll go far ahead of where we are right now in terms of getting the opportunities and the benefits.
My final word would be, while of course we talk about Indo-Pacific, and maybe I'll sound old-fashioned, but I thought that India and Australia were also very good partners in Indian Ocean Rim organization that we had started, and I think it's still alive, and I hope that is not getting sort of subsumed under this larger Indo-Pacific thing. It's a very important subset from our perspective, I believe. And sincere thanks to both the High Commissioners